Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Board of Education for February 26, 2018. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford.
Here.
Mrs. Burton.
Here.
Mr. Centers.
Here.
Mrs. Frank.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mrs. Bonnefield is here. President Johnson.
Here. We have a quorum. Thank you again for tuning in this evening. This is a special meeting. It's not going to take very long, but if you want to follow along with our agenda, you can go to our website, livoniapublicschools.org, and highlight over the board tab, and you'll see the agendas, and you can follow along. Other than Mr. Smith, I don't see anyone else in the audience. I was going to say, anybody who wants to follow an agenda who's here can get one on the table outside to the right, and I don't see anyone here. So we'll just move on to item 2, which is audience communications. Likewise, I do not have any blue slips. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, approval of bid results for Phase 5 entryways, 2013 bond and sinking fund. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to approve the entryway project budgets for Churchill High School, Garfield Community School, Nigiero Elementary, and the Central Office Administration Building in the amount of $548,067, plus contingency in the amount of $45,000, for a total of $593,067, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of the Board of Education with the recommended contractors. Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Frank. Mr. Francis, you were going to lead us off on this?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, and I just wanted to point out a couple of items on the entryways. As you know, we have a few more buildings being worked on this summer, but their entryway bid information was somewhat put together in the fuller bids because those buildings are being renovated. So we have Churchill High School and Garfield Community School from the 2013 bond. That will be the funding source for those two entryways. And as you know, the Churchill project was fully bid out last summer. They're in their second year or second phase of renovation. So on a separate bid, we have their entryway items, and that's what you're seeing here in this. That's what you're voting on and being recommended to, and that's what you saw in the bid tabs, along with Garfield Community School, which has already been renovated during the fall, and now their entryway will be constructed over the summer of 18. Both of those need to be bid out separately because they didn't have a full bid package going on for renovation. With regard to Nigiero and the Central Office Administration Building, those are just two standalone projects, hence needing bidding out as well. It's the only work that's going to be occurring at Central Office and at Nigiero. And for funding purposes, we want to point out that it will be the sinking fund that will be covering those entryways, benches, etc. So we do recommend the current bidders that are recommended with regard to the entryway projects for these 4 buildings through those 2 funding sources.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. And I also want to note that after our regular voting meeting, the last time we did have a committee of the whole meeting for those who may have tuned in that went over just these 2 projects. So are there any questions from the board? Seeing none? Then we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Frank, for approval of bid results for Phase 5 entryways. Would you take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. That'll take us to item 4, approval of bid results for Phase 5 construction projects 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Centers.
President Johnson, rather.
We're just going to slide by that.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to approve the construction project budgets for Phase 5, Buchanan Elementary, $1,163,286. Webster Elementary, $3,483,619. Jackson Early Childhood Center, $3,361,192. And Livonia Career Technical Center, $2,910,282, plus contingency in the amount of $896,539, for a total of $11,814,918, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of the Board of Education with the recommended contractors.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Vice President Burton.
President Johnson, as I mentioned in the committee of the whole meeting, I'm going to be abstaining from the discussion and the vote on this item because a member of my family bid to one of the subcontractors that may be involved in this project.
Very well. Mr. Francis.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. These buildings, Buchanan, Livonia Career Technical Center, Jackson Early Childhood Center, and Webster will be the Phase 5 2013 bond renovations coming up in this summer, 2018. The recommended vendors for Phase 5 will provide the work in multifaceted areas to complete the renovation program for these 4 buildings, and we recommend them to the Board of Education to begin, the award for the summer 2018 renovations. If you have any detailed questions, I think he's behind the pillar on me here, but I believe, yes, Mr. Smith is also here if we have any detailed questions. I know at the last committee of the whole meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion on this, but if anything has come up since, we can take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions? Mrs. Frank.
I just have a comment, and we talked about it in our meeting of the whole, but for the public, when you look at these dollar amounts, Buchanan is significantly less. And if you could just talk to that in terms of the recent renovations that were already done there,
Correct.
That's why there's such a significant lower amount, only because we have done renovations there, and so they're not as much in need as the other schools.
You've actually done most of the explanation for me, but just to pick up on that is, yes, Buchanan has been more recently renovated. For example, floors, most of the paint, ceilings, lighting, there's been mechanical work. There's been quite a bit of extensive work done at Buchanan. What you're seeing here is their secure vestibule. We're going to have to rework the front entrance. Also in there is literally their entrance archway and that whole feature. There's going to be other work, some of which won't be necessarily seen. For example, generator work and tying in things like emergency lighting to the generator, something that we've done in renovated buildings, and we want to bring Buchanan up to the same level as the other fully renovated buildings. So again, teaching wall, the technology with regard to the whiteboard and the short throw and those types of items will be completed this summer, but not nearly the scale that's going to be going on at, for example, Jackson or Webster or LCTC.
Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, then we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bradford, for the approval of bid results for Phase 5 construction projects 2013 bond. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there any other business to be brought before the board at this time? Seeing none, then we are adjourned. Thank you.